On March 27, 2025, a 19-year-old left-hander from the Philippines walked onto stadium court at the Miami Open and did something nobody in her country had ever done before. She beat the world number 2, Iga Swiatek, to reach a WTA 1000 semifinal. 12 months later, that same player lost 6-0, 6-2 to Karolina Muchova at the same tournament, barely winning enough games to fill one set. The distance between those two versions of Alex Eala is the most honest thing happening in women's tennis right now, and it tells us something that highlight reels and ranking trackers will never capture. Because the question is no longer whether Alex Eala has enough talent for the top of the sport. We settled that in Miami a year ago. The question, the real one, the one her 2026 season has been screaming from every court she has stepped onto, is whether talent this combustible can survive the particular kind of destruction that follows a breakthrough. Let me rewind. Before Miami 2025, Alex Eala was ranked 140th in the world. She was a former junior Grand Slam champion, a product of the Rafa Nadal Academy in Mallorca, a left-hander with a return game that coaches across the tour privately called one of the 5 or 6 best in women's tennis. She was also invisible. The WTA Tour is merciless that way. You can be extraordinarily gifted and still spend years floating in a middle distance where nobody writes about you, nobody sees you, and every draw feels like walking into a room where everyone else already knows each other's names. Eala spent the first half of 2025 in that liminal zone. A few 125-level results. Some qualifying rounds. A career that looked like it was trending in the right direction if you squinted and if you were already paying attention, which almost nobody was. Then Miami happened. She beat Jelena Ostapenko. She beat Madison Keys. She beat Swiatek. 3 former or current top 5 players in a single week. The Swiatek match in particular was surgical. Eala's return positioning that day was a masterclass. She was reading Swiatek's second serve so early and so accurately that the pole began double faulting under the psychological weight of what was coming back. It was the kind of performance that changes the internal weather of a career. Overnight, Eala went from promising young Filipina to legitimate threat. Her ranking rocketed from 140 to inside the top 100. By the end of 2025, after a strong second half that included a WTA 125 title, a final in Eastbourne, and consistent results across the hard-court swing, she finished the year at number 50, the first Filipina ever to reach that altitude. And here is where the story gets interesting, because 2026 has not been a continuation of 2025. It has been something much more complicated, much more painful, and ultimately much more instructive. She started the year ranked 29th in the world, her career high, and she arrived in Australia carrying expectations that did not exist 12 months earlier. For the first time in her professional life, she was the player others were preparing for. She was seated. She was discussed in pre-tournament press conferences. She was on television. And the results in early 2026 were legitimately good. At the Auckland Classic in January, she reached the semifinals before losing a heartbreaker to Wang Xinyu, a 3-setter in which she held a match point and could not convert. In Dubai in February, she made the quarterfinals of a WTA 1000, beating quality opponents before running into Coco Gauff, who dismantled her 6-0, 6-2 in a match that lasted barely over an hour. That Dubai quarterfinal was the first real data point of 2026, and it said something specific. Against opponents ranked below or near her level, Eala's game was functioning well. Against the absolute elite, the Gauffs, the Sabalenkas, the Swiateks, there was still a gap, and the gap was mostly in the same place it had always been. Her serve. The serve is the elephant in every room Alex Eala enters. She is a left-hander, which gives her natural angle advantages that most right-handers spend years trying to manufacture. Her first serve percentage in 2026 sits at 64.5%, which is respectable but not dominant. Her first serve points won percentage is 61.3%, which is below the tour average for a player of her ranking. She double faulted 61 times in her first 25 matches of the season. By comparison, she has hit only 17 aces. Think about that ratio for a moment. For every ace she produces, she gives away nearly 4 double faults. In a sport where the serve is supposed to be the one shot entirely under your control, Eala's delivery is the least reliable part of her game, and it has been since she turned professional. The reason this matters so much is that everything else about her game is built to punish. Her return of serve is genuinely elite. She ranked 5th on the entire WTA Tour in return games won percentage in 2025. Her court coverage is exceptional. Her left-handed forehand generates angles that force right-handed opponents into uncomfortable patterns. She reads the game 2 or 3 shots ahead, a quality she developed at the Nadal Academy, where tactical intelligence is drilled as rigorously as stroke production. When Eala breaks her opponent's serve, she looks like a top 20 player, sometimes better. When she has to hold her own serve against a player who can return at a high level, the architecture cracks. That is the paradox at the center of her career, and 2026 has put it under a magnifying glass. Indian Wells in March was the perfect microcosm. She arrived as a 31st seed, historical, because she was the first Filipino player, male or female, to be seeded at an event of that caliber. She beat Diana Yastremska in a 3-set war. She then faced Coco Gauff again, just weeks after the Dubai rout, and this time she was winning 6-2, 2-0 when Gauff retired with a left elbow injury. It was the kind of result that generates noise without clarity. Did she beat Gauff? Technically. Did she prove anything? The scoreline suggested she was dominant, but the retirement placed an asterisk over it that she did not ask for and could not remove. In the next round, Linda Noskova obliterated her 6-2, 6-0. The volatility was staggering. A 3-set victory over a top 30 player, a dominant position against the world number 4, then an absolute collapse against a player who simply served and struck too cleanly for Eala's return game to compensate for her own serving deficiencies. Miami was worse. The return to the site of her breakthrough felt like it should have been triumphant, and for 2 rounds it was. She beat Hailey Baptiste. She beat Jasmine Paolini, the 6th seed, 6-1, 7-6, a result that demonstrated genuine improvement against high-level opposition. She beat Sorana Cîrstea. And then Gauff again, in the quarterfinals, and this time there was no injury, no asterisk, no ambiguity. It was 0-6, 2-6. 48 minutes. Eala barely laid a glove on her. The rankings immediately responded. She had been as high as 29th. By late March, she had fallen to 45th, then 46th, shutting the points she earned a year earlier because the WTA's 52-week rolling system is pitiless about anniversary arithmetic. The very results that built her ranking were now expiring, and she was not replacing them fast enough. What followed was the transition to clay, and clay is a surface that has never been kind to Alex Eala's particular combination of strengths and weaknesses. On clay, rallies are longer. Serves are neutralized by the slower surface. The premium shifts from first strike tennis to construction, to patience, to the ability to redirect under physical duress. Eala's return game retains much of its value on clay because the surface slows the incoming ball, giving her more time to read and react. But her serve loses what little margin it had on hard courts. The slower bounce gives opponents more time to tee off on second serves that, on a faster surface, might generate enough skid to stay competitive. In Linz, her first clay event of 2026, she showed both sides of the coin. She beat Julia Grabher 6-4, 6-3 in the first round, serving with surprising efficiency, nearly 69% of first serve points won, a number that would have been encouraging if it held. It did not hold. In the second round, Ostapenko beat her 6-4, 7-5 in a match that was closer than it looked, but also felt like a lesson delivered by a player who simply had more weapons available when the rallies intensified. Stuttgart was blunter. Leylah Fernandez, a fellow left-hander, took her apart 6-1, 6-4 in the first round. Fernandez described it afterward as like playing a mirror, which was generous. It was more like playing a slightly better version of yourself and discovering exactly which areas you still have not solved. Fernandez's forehand dictated from the first game, and Eala spent most of the first set reacting rather than initiating. She fought in the second set. That much has never been in question, and even Fernandez went out of her way to praise Eala's refusal to quit, but the structural issue is clear. Against a left-hander who could serve and construct with equal authority, Eala's return game lost its asymmetrical advantage, and what remained was not enough. So now it is Madrid. The draw came out today. Eala faces a qualifier in the first round, then likely Elise Mertens, the 19th seed, a veteran who just made the second round in Stuttgart before falling to Machova in 3 sets. Beyond Mertens, the draw opens into Iga Świątek's section. The architecture is brutal, but that is almost beside the point, because Madrid is not really about the draw for Alex Eala. Madrid is about what the last 6 weeks have actually done to her. And here is what I think is being missed in most of the coverage. The conversation around Eala right now is almost entirely framed as decline. She was 29th, she is 44th, she lost in straight sets in Stuttgart, she is struggling on clay. That framing is accurate as far as it goes, but it mistakes the nature of what is happening. Eala is not declining. She is encountering, for the first time at this level, the full weight of a professional season in which she is no longer anonymous. In 2025, she was playing with house money. Nobody expected her to beat Swiatek. Nobody had scouted her patterns in granular detail. Nobody was targeting her serve with pre-match tactical plans. In 2026, all of that has changed. She is in the scouting reports now. Opponents know about the serve. They know that if they can hold to stay level in sets, Eala will eventually face a service game where the pressure compounds her mechanical inconsistencies. That knowledge has shifted the margins, and the margins in women's tennis are thin enough that a 2 or 3% swing in key points can turn a quarterfinal into a first-round exit. The serve improvement she has made is real but insufficient. Analysts noted that her first serve percentage in early 2026 was up several points from 2025, and her placement on the deuce court has become more varied, likely a product of off-season work at the Nadal Academy. But the double fault rate remains a problem, and on clay, where free points off the serve are scarce, each double fault is effectively a gift of momentum. In her Stuttgart match against Fernandez, she committed 4 double faults in the first set alone. 4. In a set, she won 1 game in. That is a player whose body is betraying a technique that her mind has not yet automated under competitive stress. What makes Eala fascinating, and what makes Madrid genuinely interesting regardless of her result, is that she is one of perhaps 3 or 4 players on the current tour who could be a fundamentally different player if a single technical issue were resolved. Her return of serve, her movement, her tactical brain, her left-handed geometry, her competitive fight, these are not things you can teach. They are either there or they are not, and in Eala they are there in abundance. The serve is teachable. It is mechanical. It is a problem that coaching and repetition and physical maturation can address. She is 20 years old. Nadal himself did not have a reliable serve until he was 23 or 24. The timeline is not unreasonable. But the gap between where her serve is and where it needs to be is not closing fast enough to prevent the ranking correction that has defined early 2026. Madrid's altitude adds a layer to all of this that is genuinely unique. At nearly 700 meters above sea level, the Caja Magica plays faster than any other clay venue on the tour. The thinner air means serves carry more speed and the ball skids through the court differently than it does in, say, Rome or Roland Garros. For most players, this makes Madrid a hybrid clay. Movement, hard court pace. For Eala, it creates a strange and specific set of conditions. The faster serve speeds theoretically help her, because her first serve, when it lands, generates enough pace to be useful in thin air. But the same physics punish her second serve more severely, because opponents can attack a slow second delivery that arrives with less topspin cushion than it would have at sea level. Meanwhile, her return game should benefit enormously, because incoming serves travel faster into her strike zone, and Eala is one of those rare players whose return quality actually improves as the pace increases. She uses the opponent's speed rather than generating her own. The math, then, is complicated. Madrid gives Eala something with one hand and takes something away with the other, and whether the net result is positive depends entirely on which version of her shows up. There is a version of Alex Eala that can beat almost anyone in this draw through 2 rounds. There is also a version that can lose to a qualifier in the first round, get broken 3 times in the first set, and walk off the court in Madrid with her ranking sliding toward 50 and the French Open feeling more like a sentence than an opportunity. But here is what I know, and it is the thing that separates Alex Eala from the dozens of other young players who have ridden a single breakthrough to temporary relevance before fading back into the middle ranks. She already survived the worst version of this story once. She lost 6-0, 6-2 to Muchova in Miami, and she did not spiral. She went to Linz and won a match. She went to Stuttgart, and, after getting crushed in the first set by Fernandez, she came out and competed authentically in the second, forcing the Canadian to earn it point by point. That does not sound like much, but it is everything. The WTA Tour is littered with players who disappeared after their first bad stretch, who let the gap between their best result and their current form become an identity crisis rather than a data set to learn from. Eala has not done that. The fighting spirit that her fans celebrate is not just a nice narrative. It is a measurable behavioral pattern. She has won 6 3-set matches this season. She came back from a 7-6 first-set loss against Laura Siegemund in Miami to win the next 2 sets. She went toe-to-toe with Ostapenko and Linz after being outplayed in the first set and came within 2 games of flipping the match. None of that guarantees anything in Madrid. Tennis does not work on guarantees. But it tells us something that the ranking number does not. It tells us that the correction is external, not internal. The ranking is falling because the calendar is ruthless and the points from last year's Miami Miracle are evaporating. But the player, the actual player, the competitor who processes loss and returns to the practice court and adjusts and fights, that player is intact. She is 20 years old, left-handed, trained by one of the great academies in the sport, and carrying her country's entire tennis history on a frame that weighs 300 grams. That weight is real. There are millions of Filipinos who watched her beat Swiatek at 2 a.m. Manila time and felt something shift in what they believed was possible. That does not go away because of a straight-set loss in Stuttgart. What Madrid will be for Alex Eala is not a redemption arc and not a proving ground. It will be a Tuesday, then a Wednesday if Tuesday goes well, then whatever Thursday brings. The season is long. The clay swing extends through Rome and then Roland Garros, and a single tournament result, good or bad, will not define a career that is still closer to its beginning than its middle. The player who beat Swiatek in Miami and the player who lost to Fernandez in Stuttgart are the same person, carrying the same gifts and the same flaws, and the distance between those 2 performances is not a mystery to be solved. It is the ordinary, unglamorous reality of being 20 years old on a professional tennis tour that does not care how good your story is. It only cares how good your next serve is. And the next one. And the next one after that. That is the work that remains, and Alex Eala, to her enormous credit, has shown no signs of being afraid of it.